Because to me, ultimately, motivation means I'm in a job that I feel is good for me and is absolutely demonstrably good for the firm as well. So why do I think we have such a gap in these systems? I think it's because we are lazy in our assumptions. And the assumptions are predicated on things that were true 50 years ago.
It's Relationships at Work, the leadership podcast helping build workplace connection, improve work culture, and avoid blind spots. I'm Russel Lolacher, the host of the show. I am a leadership expert, a communications expert, a couple of decades, very successful decades in both those areas, and a whole heap of curiosity, just like you, on how we can make the workplace a better place. Today, we're talking about motivation, the engine, the fuel that gets our teams moving, gets them working in the right direction, gets them up in the morning, gets them inspired, gets them going. Have I made that clear enough? But it's hard. It can be really, really hard to understand our teams, understand what works for them, especially as we have very, very diverse teams. Also, what motivates us? Because what might motivate them might not motivate us. And what motivated us at the beginning of our career might not motivate us now, but we haven't reassessed in such a long time. My guest today, he's all about unlocking the types of motivation. He's going to break it down for us and really help us get motivated about motivation. Hold on. And on the show today, we have James Root, and here is why he is awesome. He's a senior partner at Bain and chairman at Bain Futures. He's an adjunct professor on the faculty of the Kellogg HKUST Executive MBA program and a fellow of Hughes Hall College, Cambridge. And you may have seen some of his insights shared in Harvard Business Review or the Wall Street Journal, or seen him on CNN, CNBC, Bloomberg. He's getting around. And I should mention he also has himself a book that I think we're going to be talking a little bit about, and you may certainly check out. It's called Archetype Effect: Unlocking the 6 Types of Motivation. And he's here. Hi, James.
Hi, Russell. Good to see you.
You as well, sir. Before we get into motivation, because I know you have 6 types of motivation. You know what? I'm going to shut up because that's way too much spoilery stuff. We'll get into that in a minute. I have to start the conversation like I always like to start, which is sort of understanding a bit about you and your background. So, James, what is your best or worst employee experience?
Yes. I warn you, this is a difficult story to tell, but I do want to tell it. I had been what we call a summer associate at Bain & Company in 1988. And then I was back at business school for my second year, pondering the offer to return full-time to join Bain. And on December the 21st, 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 was blown up by Libyan terrorists over Lockerbie, Scotland. All 259 passengers and crew were murdered, as were 11 people on the ground in Lockerbie as well. 2 of the victims were Bain managers, flying from London to New York for a pre-Christmas meeting. And I had gotten to know one of them, very much admire him over the course of my summer internship. So what has this tragedy to do with employee satisfaction? Well, here I was, not a Bain employee, a student, getting ready for Christmas, as Nicholas and Peter should have been with their families. And in the immediate aftermath of the bombing, Bain wanted me to know that 2 of their own had been killed. And they wanted me to hear from them that one of them was Peter. And to this day, I do not know how they did this, because I was not even staying in my own flat in London at the time. I was house sitting for a relative a couple of miles away at the time of the bombing. But somehow, someone at Bain worked out what it was and hand-delivered a letter carrying this awful news.
Wow.
I don't think I will ever again experience such a powerful expression of what it means to be part of a team, particularly this team, of how we treat each other, even at times of unspeakable tragedy, and of how leaders think and behave. So I signed my offer letter the next day.
To reach out to someone that wasn't even on the payroll. You were not a member of Bain. You were not part of the quote unquote Bain family or any
Not at that
organization
time.
family. And the amount of effort, to your point, you weren't where you were supposed to be. You weren't an easy Google search. You weren't an easy, where is he? Or how did they even know about you?
Well,
Like to that point,
yeah, I mean, I've
they
been there
were
for this.
knowing your
I've
relationship.
been there for
Yeah.
the summer, right? I had
Right.
whatever we did, I come over 2 months or something in the London office as was then. So I was very familiar, and I think they were sort of hoping that I'd come back and it made me an offer.
Right.
So I was familiar with them, but I was technically, as you said, I was not an employee. And how they found out where I was physically staying, I still don't know. And I've never had the heart to kind of find out, because the people have probably left, and we're a much bigger firm today, so it's not so relevant. But just it meant so much to me, because I had become friendly with one of these amazing guys who was murdered by these terrorists.
And not to boil it down to be too specific, because that's a horrific story showing amazing leadership, humanity. I'm curious for yourself going forward as a leader, possibly having your own staff. You talked about how influential that was, how inspiration it was. What does it do to you when tragedy strikes, and certainly not to that level, but even just bad news? How does that influence your decision and your way of operating?
Well, it's been enormously influential. The role modeling that set for me as a way that this firm was going to behave in the worst of times. I'd already seen how it behaved in the best of times, because the summer internship has a sort of celebratory element to it, as well as a getting the work done element to it. I'd always seen that. It gives us permission to set aside hierarchy, set aside formality, just to be human beings. And over the course of a long career, I've been outside, numerous examples. I'm sure we all have. There's people dying, the 9/11 tragedy when many of us were in New York City, and multiple other situations which have called upon us to kind of declare ourselves to be, in pain and in sympathy with each other about difficult times and difficult personal situations, and to support. So I feel like I didn't know it at the time. I was too young, but I feel like later, coming back to Bain and building a career here, it's had an enormous influence on what I think of as the right way to behave as a leader in difficult situations.
You've got me on pause here a little bit with this story, understandably so. And I appreciate the warning ahead of time. This is going to be a bit emotional. I love how much this is for a new employee, because that's where new leadership, where that early influences have such impact. Because I can't tell you how many times I've asked this question before, and people are like, "Oh, when I was 20, I had the worst experience, and it's been with me for 30 years." Right? That happens all the time. But for you as well, that's so formative, because you're seeing what leadership looks like at a time when you don't know or have ever defined leadership for yourself. So why not have that sort of set into your DNA in the early days? Because somebody 20, 30, 40 years into their career might look at that quite differently than somebody that's just budding and starting and sort of being molded still.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much. I think all of us because I think they went to all of the summer associates, the same news. I think all of us were just staggered, maybe is the word, but also embraced and hardened by it as well.
Well, this is going to be a horrible segue, James.
Sorry, I know. I didn't. I wasn't sure, Russell, with that. But you asked the question direct. It always is the thing that's front of mind for me. Yeah.
And I'll be honest, it's not unrelated to what we're talking about, which is motivation, because a lot of people are motivated to work harder for organizations that have visions and ways of working that they believe in. So, I mean, it's not too far removed from what we're going to be talking about, because I'll be honest, that's inspiring. And why wouldn't you want to put in your best effort? Why wouldn't you want to try your hardest for an organization that's going to treat you like that? So, see, segue wasn't horrible. It wasn't a horrible segue. So, kicking off with our first question, yes. I do like to start all my conversations with a bit of clarity, a bit of definition. And you've defined 6 different motivations, but I want to go even deeper than that and just focus on what motivation even is to your mind when it comes to the workplace. Can you define it for me?
Yes. And I'm going to, if it's okay, I'm going to back up a little bit to get to that. I love the topics that you treat on your pod here, Russell. I've studied them. I want to start by saying I think work is pretty messy at the moment. I think we're in a sort of messy phase. I think gig work and remote work and cross-functional teams and self-managing teams and all these skill mismatches and aging workforce, working with ecosystem partner firms just as closely as you work with your own. And then, of course, the avalanche of AI come in, which may change everything, may change something. We don't know yet. But I think it's pretty stressful. I think there's a lot of stress at work for a lot of people, including people who manage talent as well. It's quite complicated. Part of the problem is that we spend so much time thinking about tasks, skills, jobs, that we don't spend any time thinking about what motivates the individual who has the skills or do the tasks or owns the jobs. And I think that's a gap. As soon as we stop to think about motivation, the thing that jumps out for me is that our talent systems, most firms, most organizations, nonprofits, governments, private sector firms, public sector, publicly listed firms use are very, very poorly suited to, first of all, just acknowledge and accommodate the differences and then embrace them and use them as some positive aspect to kind of making more good jobs. Because to me, ultimately, motivation means I'm in a job that I feel is good for me and is absolutely demonstrably good for the firm as well. So why do I think we have such a gap in these systems? I think it's because we are lazy in our assumptions. And the assumptions are predicated on things that were true 50 years ago, that everybody's trying to kind of, struggle up the corporate ladder and take the next step and have more spans and have more layers and get closer to the leadership team. That's the assumption upon which these systems are built. And both from an organization point of view and from a personal point of view, I think it is very clear that that's just not true. Many organizations today, I would say, maybe not all, but certainly more than most, would say, I have roles for individual contributors. I have roles for experts. I have roles for coaches. And that kind of old-fashioned professional manager idea where I'm carving up work and allocating it out and then reviewing people and performance managing them, it hasn't disappeared completely. I'm not suggesting it's gone, but it is certainly being nudged aside by this idea that many different types of roles are super valuable in our firm. I can give you dozens of examples. A recent one for me was Andy Jassy being interviewed by Bloomberg a couple of months ago. Quote, I'm trying to remember the exact quote. He said, we're taking work away from, we're reducing the number of middle managers, which I think everybody knows, many firms are doing that. And we're giving more power, not work, but we're giving more power to individual contributors. There are many, many firms today where, definitions of success and progress and results are not about taking the next step up the ladder. They can be something very different. And there are firms today, by the way, and Amazon again is one of them, where you have to apply to be a manager. You actually have to write a memo. Can I please be a manager? This is why I think I would be good at it, as opposed to that just being the inevitable consequence of time at task. So that's on the organization side. On the people side, meantime, we did this wonderful thing. Maybe 10 years ago, we started really doing it, maybe longer in some cases. We said, who are you? Who do you want to be? Tell me. You want to take some time off to do your side hustle? You want to change to another country? You want to go climb a mountain? You want to support your spouse having a battle? Who do you want? We'll try to be who try to meet you where you want to be. And guess what? Turns out when we asked people what they want, they did not all say, can I just climb the ladder, please? Some of them, that's great. By the way, I'm a little bit like that. That's what my career, I'm what I'll go on to explain it later, but I'm a striver. I'm evolving as I age, but that's kind of a striver approach. But lots and lots of people don't want that. So I think this concept of what is motivation is that it's individual. And it's fortunately not so individual that we can't talk about patterns, because that would be problematic. I mean, there was a period in this research program that we've been on, Russell, where I was very worried that it was so individual that I wouldn't have anything to say about it. So why are you motivated in the way that you are? Why am I? Is it because you sat around as a kid at the dinner table and listened to your parents talk about money and jobs or something? Was it your school? Did your school say, this is why you're going to go to work and what it's going to feel like? Was it your first job? You had some crappy boss or you had some amazing boss? Is it your current role that's sort of changing the way you get rewards and satisfaction and engagement and relationships and fun and all that? Is it, or is it the fact that, you're a Capricorn dragon or whatever you are in China? Me, I'm a Capricorn in the Western zodiac and I'm an ox in the Chinese zodiac. Am I destined just to be a strider? Because those are kind of the characteristics of those two. Is it internal? Is it nature? Is it nurture? I don't. So we went after this open-minded and talked to 50,000 people in the world in great detail about what motivates them at work. All sorts of people, all sorts of jobs, high income, low income, middle, highly educated, not re-educated, men, women, urban, rural, 19 countries. And it turns out you can come up with these patterns. So I'll pause. We'll probably get to those 6 archetypes in a while, but I think that that's sort of where I'm at. So important, even in the world of AI, which I'm sure we'll get to, that people are still the most valuable resources. We treat them all the same, whereas in fact, their motivations are quite different.
Hey, if you're enjoying the insights from our guests, you'll love our Raw Notes newsletter. It's packed with guest takeaways, the resources that inspire them, and my own tips on how we as leaders can be better humans for the humans that we're responsible for. Go to relationshipsatworkshow.com and subscribe now and help the workplace be more human. And that was your next logical step, I'm guessing. I mean, you've teased like hell about your 6 different motivations.
Right.
So I'm guessing, no, I think right now is where we should get into them, because I think motivation's a great baseline, but then to your point, diversity is not what we're taking into account when it comes to motivation, because most organizations will talk about inspiring. Hey, look at our vision and mission. Do you not believe in what we do? That should be enough to make you want to ... Or incentivize. We'll pay you more money. We'll give you more responsibility. Yes. That should be your motivation. But to your point, that is not the cookie cutter approach, especially generationally. Certainly new generations are going, I dress for the job I want. I'll show up in, board shorts and, look like I'm going surfing. They have much different perspectives at work.
They do.
So I think I'm curious, how do you break up motivation then?
So we came at this, as I said, very open-minded, but hoping that there'll be patterns across the world, across genders, across countries, across age cohorts, etc. And thank heavens there were. By the time after we talked to the data long enough, we ended up with 6. I want to describe them briefly. Not 5, not 7. So 6 means we could see definable boundaries at the edges of these motivational profiles. That meant that really is different. Of course, there's overlap. Of course. And when people take the quiz or do the research instrument, they might often come back and say, I'm very high on this, but I'm reasonably high on that as well. So people can draw on the energy of multiple of these motivational profiles, which is very different than some of the older systems like an MBTI, where you're just one thing permanently and for always and forever, cradle to grave, which just has never struck me as being particularly likely. So let me run through the 6. I'm curious what you are. I've already told you what I am, but I'll tell you what I'm becoming. So the first we would call a giver. And a giver is a person that finds their motivation to work by helping others thrive. It's not that they don't care about themselves. They do care about themselves. They like to learn. They're the least motivated by money, actually. Their thing is, I want to create environments or teams or situations or firms where other people can shine. That's the first one. I'm a big movie person. There's a lot of movie stuff in the book. Think Erin Brockovich. Okay.
You're talking to the right audience for the movie. Keep going. Keep going.
Operators. And operators is important because operators are the biggest cohort in the global worker population. I'll tell you about that in a minute. What this profile does is they have no interest in finding meaning and purpose at work. If they have a search for meaning and purpose in their lives, which many do, they'll find it outside. Maybe it's their family, maybe it's their church, maybe it's something else that they are very, very committed to. But they want to do a good job. They want to keep their head down at work, take no risk, get home so they can pick up Johnny from football at 5 o'clock or whatever it is that their thing is. And they're very teamy. They really like the camaraderie of work. So they'll often they'll expect to have friendships at work and they'll be the backbone of the team. I don't know if you know, there's an old movie called Office Space, classic 1999 movie. Peter Gibbons in Office Space is the ultimate operator. Where he's, there's a great scene where he's being interviewed by the consultants who come in and figure out what's going on in the firm. So I'm not lazy. I'm just not motivated, what he says. And that I couldn't be a better spokesman for the operator. So the third, the artisan, is a person who seeks out work that just fascinates them. Very high quality standards. They want to do great work. They want to be left alone to do great work. Don't send me any forms from HR to fill in, or just keep that away from me. Autonomy, very high quality. I want my work product to be useful to the team. It's not that I'm just doing something for nothing, but I don't want to have to do all that camaraderie stuff. Don't get it. Don't bother me with that. And similarly, in a way, because of the learning connection, the fourth profile is the explorer. Oh, by the way, the artisan, I don't know how deep you go in movies. The best way I think about artisans is actually sushi chefs. I always think it because every day I go to work, I do the same thing, trying to get to perfection. I'm never going to get to perfection, but I'm trying to keep going there. So there's a great documentary called Jiro Dreams of Sushi about a sushi chef and Barry Gencher. Doesn't matter. That's the kind of model in my mind. Explorers, as the name suggests, they kind of value freedom to try new things. They're going to have multiple jobs in their career. They will trade off. They'll trade off money. They'll trade off status and title to keep the autonomy that allows them to keep trying new experiences and new things, new jobs, new countries, and whatever it might be. And in terms of professional development, they're very consistent. They will only skill up enough to do the current job because they know probably I'm going to be doing something else in 2 to 5 years. So that's a very interesting profile. Walter Mitty is my perfect example of that, right? The last two are they're linked by this passion for achievement at work. So the striver, I mentioned, I've been a striver most of my career, is somebody that really want to make something of themselves at work professionally. They are not big risk takers, actually. They plan ahead. They love the goals. They love the milestones. They love the achievements. And they love the recognitions that come with hitting those milestones, whether it's a title or it's money or whether it's just the recognition from somebody that said you had a goal, you hit it. So this is, the modern one would be Jordan Belcher, I think, in Wolf of Wall Street. But my favorite, because I'm an older guy, is actually Tess McGill played by Melanie Griffith in Working Girl, which is the ultimate striver, like coming across on the Staten Island ferry every day to go to Wall Street. Pioneers, the last one, which is the smallest cohort, but we're going to talk about them more because they have an interesting role in leadership. Pioneers are on a mission to change the world. And they form these very strong views about how things should be in their organization. And they sort of seek out the control necessary to get to that outcome, trying to bend the will of other people to come with them. But even if they're not coming with them, the pioneers are going anyway. They kind of move fast, break things type of thing, right? Go to brick walls if you have to. Very risk tolerant, I would say even risk seeking. And the vision matters more than anything else to them. And it doesn't have to be, when I say change the world, I don't mean that literally, although you could say this is a kind of Muskian, turn us into a multi-planetary species type of feature, but it could be, example I often use is I've got a friend who's a pioneer, who's a financial controller, and her thing is I want to change the way we do the month-end close. And that is kind of changing the world because month-end close is a big thing and for her as a CFO and in her firm. So you could have a sort of massive definition of change the world or a micro in your situation. So those are the 6. And just for the numbers, those of your listeners who are interested, operators 24%. There are pluses and minuses from country to country, but more or less 24% of the working population. So by gosh, you better know how to manage operators if you're a leader. Strivers, the next biggest, 21%. Then we have artisans and givers who are about 17%. And then the last two is the smallest, explorers 11, pioneers 10. So if you're looking at this and identifying with one, you can sort of calibrate where that fits into the working population overall. Doesn't mean in your firm or in your government agency it's exactly that, but just on average across the world.
Want more from our conversations on the show? Subscribe to the Raw Notes newsletter. It's where I share top takeaways from our guests, the resources that fuel their success, and my personal insights on how we as leaders can be more human. And we need more human. Go to relationshipsatworkshow.com and sign up today to keep your leadership journey on the right path. These all sound super personal, though, James. Like, it sounds like individualized. But when we talk to motivation in the workplace, we talk personal, but we also talk team motivation and we talk organizational motivation. How does that connect across there?
Yeah. I mean, I have decided to define team motivation as a function of individual motivations being well managed. Of course, teams can be motivated by objectives, no doubt. And particularly, I see this with my clients. I'm sure you see the same thing. More and more self-managing teams who have accountability to set at least some of their own objectives. There may be some high-level corporate goals, but you're self-managing. You decide how you're going to do it, and that's a very, very common. Spotify is the great example with their squads, 8-person squads, where they decide what they're going to build, how they're going to make it interoperable with everything else, all the rest of it. And they can, many other firms have systems like that these days. Corporate ambition and motivation, I think, is a different animal. I mean, I'd like to come on later if we have time and talk about the role of mission and purpose at the corporate level, because I think it's important. But so I think of these archetypes, they're not tests like some of these other systems. These are kind of shorthand assistants for you to know, why do I love my job? Why do I hate my job? Why do I hate that part of my job? Why do I have tension with that when I'm in meetings with Russell, whereas I have great meetings when I'm with James? It could be something to do with the fact that that's this profile, and I'll talk about this later maybe, and he's or she's the other profile, and naturally there are tensions between us. The understanding of that tension at a team level is an unlock for productivity and ultimately business results, which is what we all care about most.
You previously talked about that whole, asking yourself, what's your motivation? Who are you on the inside? Which I think, to the point, we have to understand ourselves. The self-awareness piece is huge when it comes to these 6. How can we identify, what are we looking for ourselves? What are red, green flags that we can pay attention to understand our own motivation? Because from the outside looking in, others may not see what we know and feel in ourselves.
Yeah, so good. Such a good thought, because I think the way to make these kinds of things practical does require a certain bravery to say, this is who I am. I don't want to take that assignment, not because I'm lazy but it's because what I really care about is this type of work, because that's what motivates me. So I'll give you an example. There's a firm I know that has, traditionally always hired a certain type of profile, maybe a business school graduate or something like that. And that's been the bulk of the workforce. And there are actually many firms going through a similar transition. The last 5-10 years, particularly, this firm, like many others, is upskilling itself in terms of information technology, digital, and now AI. Hiring thousands and thousands of people who come from very different backgrounds. Different sort of school backgrounds, different prior job experiences. And it turns out when you do the work and you go and talk to those people about what motivates them, you say the traditional employee in this firm, and it's very clear, a lot of them are, help me, set me the milestone. I'm going to take that hill. Promote me, help me. I'd like to get promoted faster if I can, because that's the kind of person that I am. And design, the whole talent system has been designed around that model, because that was a model that many years. The new talent is motivated by different things. Very often, whether he's a data architect or data scientist or DevOps or product managers, whatever it is, that's interesting. I'd like to work on that. That's innovative. That's the kind of work I want to do, because that's new and exciting. But it's not going to get me promoted super fast. Yeah, it's okay. I don't care. So when you have a talent system that's designed around one archetype, which almost all firms do, they don't know that they've got that, but it's not a criticism. It's just a fact. But most of our talent systems are designed around that concept of the striver, because all these ideas, as I said earlier, go back 50 years when that was the model of employment. But today, we have a lot of artisans in the workforce, whether they're trading stocks on Robinhood or whether they are, building AI models in Silicon Valley. Very different profiles are coming to the fore in business. But our talent systems are kind of lagging behind, trying to catch up, trying to be more flexible. But we don't really have a good definition of flexibility yet in the way we manage talent. So I don't know if that answers.
Well, I'm curious more from the flexibility standpoint, because you even mentioned when you were going through the 6 archetypes for you personally, you've changed over time.
Yes.
Your motivation has certainly changed. How do you navigate that as an individual, as a leader, to go, well, I needed money and now I don't need money as much because I'm this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
Do you show up differently?
I think you do. I mean, so as I said, I've been a striver most of my career, and how I wish I'd known that, by the way, 30 years ago, and have that lens to understand all my kind of weird quirks of behavior. I would have been a lot kinder to myself, I think. What I know now from all our work, because I've understood about what strivers are, is that strivers and pioneers, when young, there's quite a common pattern that they become givers and artisans as they age. I'm not saying everybody does. Some people, I'm a striver, I'm just the whole way through my career, that's who I am. I'm a giver the whole way through my career, that's who I am. But there is a pattern of evolution that's very clear in the data around the world. Pioneers and strivers, when young, can become more focused on being givers, either want to mentor people, give back, create environments where others can succeed because they're kind of paying it back, or artisans. They want to be left alone a bit more, be a bit more autonomous. They're more focused, as you just said, on interesting work than they are on compensation, those kinds of criteria. In the middle of my career, I left Bain and I became part of a founding team of a startup in Asia doing business process outsourcing. And I couldn't have been more excited. Amazing. And, the other founders were people I knew very well. I'd worked with a lot. I trusted. Our business plan was great. We raised money in our seed round. We raised a lot of money in our Series A. And it was amazing. And so for the first year or so in the new flag, I was sort of behaving like a pioneer. I was taking risks and I was shaping the vision, leading from the front in client acquisitions, putting the team. And looking back now, I can see it just really wasn't me. I mean, I was okay, but it really wasn't fundamentally me. But this archetype lens that we've developed in the last couple of years has given me an insight as to why I sort of felt uncomfortable almost all the time in that role, even though I was doing the role. It didn't, somehow in here, it didn't feel quite right. Whereas in the prior firm back at Bain, where I then returned to, there was a deep comfort in the way I was being leveraged and evaluated and performance managed and a career path options. So, I feel like I wish I'd had the archetype effect back then. I've taken 3 or 4 risks in my career. That was the biggest one. And now I feel very fortunate. I work at a place that's allowing me to be more of a giver and more of an artisan as I get older.
How do you handle it if you feel like you're more than one motivation? Because I'm looking at these and I'm thinking, well, I'm a giver, but there are times when I'm a striver, but yeah, I'm a pioneer. Maybe I'm not as risk that way, but I do like change. Like it even with motivation sort of being this box, even the 6 can feel like they're limiting or confining if somebody feels like they're more than. How do you handle that?
I mean, hopefully not confining, because we designed this such that you could definitely be a couple of things. So if you take the quiz, Russell, when you do that, you'll get some scores, the numbers of whatever, they just reflect how you answer these questions on a spectrum, which will give you a sense of, I'm very strong on this. And I may be strong or kind of medium strong on something else. So it'd be interesting. You can't go back in time and do it when you were 20 years younger, of course, although you could try to guess at yourself. But I wouldn't, I don't see it as constraining. I feel most people are one thing primarily, but a lot of people that we've looked at, we've had, besides the 50,000, like another 150,000 people have taken this quiz. Most people are one thing. The next biggest group are people who are a couple of things, where their scores on a couple of archetypes. And sometimes those are kind of completely intuitive. I'm pioneer and explorer. Okay, I could see how those 2 things sort of go together. Or I'm striver and operator. Those 2 things sort of go together. And then sometimes people are more. And so, I don't know whether it's just the week at work or whether it's in some stage of their career where they're considering change. I know that if I'd taken the quiz at the moment I was leaving Bain back 20 years ago, I would be a pioneer. And I'm not a pioneer. Fundamentally, I'm not. But at that moment, those few years around the decision to lead and then leading, that's what it would have said. So don't look at it as a constraint. Okay. By design, unlike the MBTI kind of things of the world where you can only ever be one thing, by design, this allows more flexibility. And so you can be sort of kinder to yourself in terms of what you're experiencing and feeling about what's going well at work and what's not going so well.
How do you recommend leaders introduce this in their teams? So I'll speak to my own experience. Yes. I remember doing a motivation exercise with my teams, and I can't remember the exercise we did. This would have been super handy. But I will say the motivations were varied. So some were motivated by money, some were motivated by achievement. It's sort of, there was a bit of flavor for what you have here for the archetypes.
Yes.
What we found super interesting was we did the exercises in front of each other and shared that information with each other so that Bob knew what motivated Sarah, because it wasn't information we kept to ourselves, which I think is a big challenge for a lot, because they'll do these exercises and they'll go, thanks, it's all for me. Now I know myself better. And then they go into their hidey hole and they don't ever share that, or they might just share it with their boss.
Yeah.
So as the leader, that was really effective, because then they could feel like, what are the connective tissues between motivation and stuff? Is that a good approach, or do you have sort of another way of introducing this into a team setting other than here's the test?
So in short, what you said first is a great approach. Let me elaborate. Okay. And there's some stories in the book about people doing this. I think there is potentially a group of people who would take input like this and just own it for themselves. Kind of self-help. But let's be clear, I'm not a self-help person. I'm not a professional psychologist. So I wouldn't ever be so presumptuous as to say that that's what I'm trying to do here. I care about organizations and businesses and results. Can't help myself. So I think the way to do it is that typically what we do, you take a cohort in an organization, it could be a division or a unit or a whole, it's not too big, the whole team. And you run the survey and you get everybody to participate. And you then can share those results back. So this is what we look like as a firm. Wow, that's pretty. I never knew that. We got all these people who are like this and very few people who are like this. That's interesting. But then the second phase is to get into focus groups. And typically the focus groups are done by archetype. And these have been some of the most kind of emotional meetings I've ever been in. It's extraordinary. You go into these, say there's a room full of strivers, you go talk to them about how do you experience the talent management system at your firm? How are you really motivated at work? And then over here, you've got a room full of pioneers and explorers and asking them the same questions. And I can't do it here, but I could show. It's like you're talking to two different species. They're not even using the same words to describe their experience at work or their aspirations at work. And I'll never forget the quotation from one woman, actually it was here in China, who said at the end of the focus group, I'm a pioneer living in a striver's world, and I've just got to get used to that. It's like, and now I've understood what it is I don't like about the talent system that I'm being evaluated by. Can I change that system? Probably not. Can I change myself? Maybe a little bit, but I understand the dissonance. So at the team level, you share it with the team. You have to, I think the obligation is, as a team, and it could be teams of teams of teams, depending on how deep you go, you share your archetype, and the team leader's job is to bring everybody together and say, okay, this team has got this operator, 2 artisans, 1 giver, and I'm a striver. Now let's talk about that. And so I tell a story in the book about a woman at a consumer products company who does exactly this. And she understands that she can get very stressed out towards the big deadlines because she is a striver. She's very ambitious. She's looking for the next promotion. Maybe I can get it in 6 months as opposed to a year, because that's what strivers think. Meantime, as an artisan who doesn't want to go to, doesn't want to go to the training, doesn't want to go to the team drinks, meetings, because he's like, I don't want to do that. It's not my thing. The giver's trying to do training sessions to get everybody to know how to work on cross-functional teams. And then it's a real story. And she did a brilliant job. Amy did a brilliant job of just sort of understanding, trying to adapt our own leadership style around the individual. So I think that's where you go with it. I think there may be value in it as an individual. Oh, I understood more about myself. I think the true unlock is when you can share what's going on with you with other teammates and just accommodate. Self-awareness, other awareness equals accommodation.
So I'm going to put my black hat on here for a minute, James, and think, wouldn't it be easier if organizations just hired one motivation? Because truthfully, if you have a team that has all 6 different motivations, that's a lot more work for the leader. That's now having to go, well, we have a giver and a striver and their conflict is crazy. I just want to produce a widget. I just want to provide a service. We need to all pull in the same direction. Maybe having the same type of carrot, everybody likes the same type of carrot's the way to go. Yeah. Or is there benefit to having diverse motivations?
It's such an interesting question. And of course, I really don't know the answer, but I'm going to tell you what I think because I thought about it so much. First of all, I think it's almost impossible to imagine any firm doing that. Just the nature of our recruiting processes. It makes it so statistically unlikely that you'd ever end up with, 90% one, unless you actually screened for it, which I think is maybe that's the thought experiment you're doing. One thing I can tell you is that across job types, so we use the highest level of 50,000 is not a big enough sample to tell you what's going on in financial services or telecoms or media, but it is enough to tell you what's going on in service jobs, manual jobs, knowledge jobs, admin jobs, care jobs, the big 5 kind of classification typically used by many governments. Interestingly enough, when you look at the profile mix across all of those 5 job categories, all archetypes are in all types of jobs. So you might say, knowledge workers, surely no operators. No, plenty of operators are in knowledge worker jobs. You might say manual jobs, surely no pioneers are doing. Yeah, plenty of pioneers are doing that. So I suspect that has led me to believe that the last thing you want to do, you want to start the next SpaceX. What do? Just go out and hire a bunch of pioneers and explorers? I don't think so. I'm not sure anything's going to get done at your firm. People are moving jobs all the time. There's, can we change all that? Can we start again? And I may have a better way of doing it. So I strongly believe that most firms do need a mix. I don't think, however, that there's kind of a perfect mix. Again, this is what I've come to believe over 3 years of thinking about it. I want the challenge of other people's ideas as they get into this research, but I don't think I want to have 32.1% striver and 16.7% pioneer, because that's going to be the unlock for me. And you do see this with other systems. I mean, you can go onto Quora or Reddit or WeChat, and there's this, what's the perfect mix of MBTI for my, innovation team in laboratory instruments? No, I don't think that's a question. There are yards and yards of dialogue about that. So I think what you do is you first of all understand what you have. And you say, does that make sense given the kind of work that we do, the way we engage our clients, whatever our customers might look like? And then you say, I may want to correct for some things because I may be missing a bunch of people who look like this. They would bring something to the table. Or you say, no, actually, I think I want more pioneers. I want more innovation in my firm. I want more that type of energy. But by and large, I think I would not go down the path that you suggested. I like the thought experiment. I tried that thought experiment, but I can't get myself to it. You mentioned something else. Can I jump on one other thing you said?
Please.
In the book, I talk about the natural tensions between certain archetypes, because each archetype has a sort of primary working style that they enjoy and like and are good at. And I'm not going to go through all of those, but I think it's valuable. Just for an example, I think I talk about 10 in the book because, again, not scientific. They're just the 10 that I've seen most. But I'll talk about a couple. For pioneers and strivers, for example, just to give you a bit more flavor about how a leader would need to deal with this. What happens is that the ambitions and the focus on advancement of the striver can conflict with the pioneer sense of, we've got to do the big vision, right? Because that has big vision has uncertainties in it. I don't exactly know what the goals are going to be. I don't exactly know what the milestones will be. So strivers see pioneers as impractical. And pioneers see strivers as too individualistic. So, I won't get into the solutions today, but another one, artisans and givers. I'll do three, so we get all six.
Give one, yeah, please.
Artisans and givers. Artisans prioritize individual mastery, right? We talked about that. That's what they love to do. Mastery of the craft. And givers are all about collaboration. So artisans are the least team-oriented archetype. Givers are the most team-oriented. It's all about the team for the givers, right? So to the givers, the artisans just look very uncooperative. I had great experience with a product manager in a B2B payments firm in Shanghai who was new in the product manager role. Trying to manage, she's got the engineers, she's got the guys writing code, mostly guys. She's got marketing people, legal people. And she was having a terrible time with the guys writing code. It's like they won't come to any meetings and they're just very annoying. And she did the quiz with everybody. She'd done the quiz on herself, so she knew what she was. And she, they're just artisans. It's okay. It's perfectly fine that they should be being asked. I just didn't get that before. I thought they were being bullshit. But now I see they just want to be left alone. So I just need to find a different way. Anyway, so operators and explorers is a third and last example of the tensions people to think about. So the operators like stability, not a criticism. It's just they like routine, they like the process, because then they could do a great job and still get home to pick up Johnny from football, right? But that kind of focus on, the explorer who loves constant change looks very, very disruptive in the eyes of an operator. So you can see how those two profiles will be. I'm going to change my new job, and the pioneers coming in to say, "Oh, look, can we change the way we do this?" And even as you asked about leaders earlier, leaders conflict with the teams that they lead quite a bit, Russell. It's one of the insights that I wasn't expecting. I thought, we have leaders would have their archetype profiles and workers, but it turns out you get almost twice as many pioneers in the leadership teams as you do in the front line. And so when you walk in as a leader, because you're a pioneer, let's imagine you say, "Here, Acme Co, we're all about permanent transformation, right? That's how we're going to stay competitive." The operators are going, I don't do that. The other pioneers are going, "Okay, sure, permanent transformation sounds good to me." And the explorers are going, "Maybe that'll give me the chance to get a new job, try something different." And the strivers are going, "No. I know where I'm going. I know the mountain you told me to take. I'm going to take it. Just don't change that." Operators are going, "My process works. What's wrong?" Right? So leader communication is a very tense area that people armed with this approach could really do some work on. I don't know. I went on a bit too long on that, but
No, all good. You talked a bit about needing these teams to have diverse motivations and how important it is to do that. Because obviously I was doing the whole, what if they were all the same? Wouldn't that be better? However, you've seen it work. You've seen teams have multiple where they have the strong leadership. What reoccurring themes have you seen in organizational cultures that support diverse motivations? I bring this up as well because you talk about communication and how that's a bedrock. And I think great communication has to be part of leadership, but not only that, part of a great culture. So from an organization standpoint, what are the healthy cultures that can sort of adopt this? We can support multiple types of motivation.
I think it's there. What I find is I spend time with CHROs and other people, leaders, founders or owners or C-suite people. They all understand and want to be more flexible for their people. But whether you've got SAP, SuccessFactors or Meta Workplaces or PeopleSoft, whatever you've got embedded, it's just really hard to fight that. Today, honestly, I'm going to exaggerate to make my point a bit, but the only really real place that we have flexibility is in the C-suite. Oh, he's got to live in San Francisco, but the job's in Seattle. That's okay. We'll make an exception. Oh, we're going to do something because the kids are going to school. We'll be flexible about that. For the rest of us, the systems are not that flexible. In fact, they've been designed to be low cost, all good. favor that. They've been designed to be efficient, but in achieving low cost and efficiency, they've homogenized everybody. And I think the whole point of this work is to say, hang on a minute, we're not homogeneous. We have different skills, you understand that, but we also have different motivations, and that's as important as our skill differences. So I think a culture that says, I really want to take on this idea of flexibility is likely to be very open to this. And I've seen that many times. So let's dig deep on flexibility. I'm all in favor of flexibility. Fantastic. And there are some wonderful examples in the world of people or firms trying to be flexible on compensation. Do you want more base or bonus? Do you want more even equity versus cash? Many good examples of that. There are good examples of firms doing career path flexibility, doing, you can work on special projects of your own choice flexibility. There's all sorts of variants of this, but it's just not deeply embedded across the economy. Right? It's like, notice one, you go, that's amazing. Maybe some other people are doing something, but there's a lot of places that still do not think that that's that valuable because they're not worrying about the motivations of people because they're assuming that we're all strivers. Just trying to plot up a ladder and that'll take care of us. Right? That's the assumption. Having said all that, go ahead. You were going to ask a question.
I was just going to say, well, you used examples where the organization is getting about compensation, but then I look at a giver going, I don't want compensation. I'm building relationships. I'm about collaboration. Yeah. How do you reward? How do you recognize when it comes to those people? And I'm singling one out because that's sort of how I'm thinking, because we could go through all six, but we don't have time. Yep. So the giver, for example, how do you recognize someone in a culture that is based on recognition, rewards, and performance?
I mean, you do it by, first of all, knowing that that's what they care about. And then if you care enough about that, you create situations at the monthly town hall or at the daily stand-up where you say, Russell, I just want to recognize you this morning for that incredible training you put together for the rest of us, because that really helped us to do blah, 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 blah. And thank you for creating that moment. So you do it by knowing that different people have different motivations. It's kind of the whole thing. But then you have to be willing to say, there are all these elements of an employee value proposition, around wellness programs, around money, around time off, about flexible hours, about passion projects, about this and that. I can, if I try, I can adapt the proposition around individual motivations. By the way, you don't even have to know what that person's motivation is. I like the analogy of mobile wireless telephone programs. So I can create a program for road warrior, right? He or she wants lots of no roaming chargeable. I can create a program for families who've got teenage kids and they want to have a certain type of monthly payment. I can create a program for people who just care about streaming sports or entertainment. And I can just put those programs out there. I don't even need to know that you, Russell, are this type of buyer or that I am that type. You'll find it. You'll see that. And that'll be the dog whistles. Oh, that's the program for me. We can do that at our firms around people propositions as well. So although I prefer to know what your profile is, in a vast firm with tens and tens of thousands of people, I can simply create combinations of features in my proposition that I know are going to attract a giver. I know are going to attract a striver, and do it that way. But it's the culture, I think, comes from a recognition, first and foremost, at the top, that we're not all strivers. Strivers are great. 21% of the working population, how are they? But we're not all strivers, and we need to, and it's not difficult. It's really not that difficult. We need to just tweak our systems, our pay structures, our time off policies, things that really matter to people in a way that can have significant extra appeal and therefore retention benefits, productivity benefits, business results benefits. Not easy. You need a will, but when you have the will, there's certainly a way.
I'm trying to think of these traditional artifacts for a lot of organizations, like onboarding, performance reviews. How are we integrating? How do we integrate this understanding of motivations into these traditional ways of working?
Yeah, well, it's not really happening at all at the moment, very much.
No, no, not
right?
at all.
So, I mean, I would go back and say, if you if you buy my hypothesis that the reason that we are struggling a little bit, particularly with the younger generation, is that our assumptions are 50 years old. It's not just that we didn't worry about motivation, because individual motivation, if it didn't matter at all. Nobody cared about it because it was just assumed that you're going to be a certain way. And it's not just, it's the entire people system. It is onboarding, it is recruiting, it is career pathing, it is performance evaluation. They're all designed around that assumption that everybody's just trying to get more spans and more layers and go closer to leadership. So I think if this triggers you, you'll start to think about not just what I'm talking about on reward systems, but also all those other people systems, because you can't really change one without having an influence on the others.
So I want to wrap up. I like wrapping up our conversation with an idea of someone listening, someone going, I need to understand my motivation. I need to understand my team's motivation. I love understanding, that there is not just one type. What would you recommend to somebody listening right now, besides taking the test and reading your book, which I highly recommend? What's a first step? What's a baby step in the direction to get a better handle on this as a leader?
Well, first of all, I'm going to be very humble and say that I know there's a certain amount of eye rolling when another one of these things comes along, because there's a bunch of them, and what am I green donkey this week or something, and I know them. There is some cynicism. I want to reassure your listeners that there's deep data integrity in this model. This is not, we didn't just make this up. There's an incredible amount of data that's gone into this. So have some confidence that it's likely to be predictive of you. If you take the quiz and read the description of that profile, if you walk away from that, go, well, that has nothing to do with me, I'm quite surprised, first of all. So second of all, to answer your question, what do I do? I think be brave. Be brave. Take it, show your colleagues on, maybe just start with your team. Could be the team that you report into, could be the team that reports into you, could just be a team of peers with the kids. So can we do this over a lunch break? Because the quiz takes 1 minute to do. And then you have to sort of start thinking about yourself a little bit. Second, do not guess other people's archetype. And the reason that you should not ever guess is because people conceal things about themselves at work. Again, it's not a criticism, it's just a fact. Even if we haven't been through the DEI revolution, but already know, people do, they accommodate, they try to fit in more, or suppress certain parts of their own perspective, and because they think it might hinder their progress. So don't guess, just ask, offer, and this is me. I'd love you to take the test as well, because I want to understand, what it is about our working relationship. And then you evangelize. If you like it, then you evangelize, and you go to your HR teams and say, we should do this across the entire unit, or this entire office, or this customer contact center, or this manufacturing plant. The beauty of this, I think, is in our sample of workers in here, Russell, we've got, I've got manicurists from Brazil and sanitation workers from China and car mechanics from India and all sorts, as well as white collar workers with senior leadership jobs. But like they always say about psychology research, is all psychology research is done on first, second year psychology undergraduates. We didn't do that. We consciously went very wide, very deep on types of workers. So I think there are many, many environments, even for us who live in heavy service economies, where you can apply this and have comfort that it's got some credibility behind it. But so bravery, try it, don't guess, ask your colleagues, start with a small group, have a lunch meeting, discuss it. I think I'm like this. I think I'm a bit like this, and like you're saying, I think I'm this and this. And that's what the data's telling me. And say, when we work on our next project together, what would make it easier? What would make it easier for me? So, that's a baby step.
That is James Root. He's the author of The Archetype Effect, Unlocking the 6 Types of Motivation. Highly recommend you pick that up, because you'll understand a lot more about what we're talking about as well. Thank you so much for being here, James.
Thank you, Russell. Great to chat.
And that's it. We're done. Another episode of Relationships at Work, the Leadership Podcast, helping you build workplace connection, improve culture, and avoid blind spots. I'm Russell. Huge thanks to James Root for being here and helping us with our archetypes. Archetypes. I fumble that word quite a bit, which is stupid. I'm a word guy. I should get this right before I start using it in sentences. Anyway, helping us with our motivation and the different types of it. I think it's a hugely important topic that we as leaders sometimes get too busy to not spend enough time on. Again, for ourselves and for our teams. That will put a pin in another episode. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, can't thank you enough for being supporters of the show, for listening. It's how the show grows, is people listening, people getting value from it and sharing it with others. So if you think there's anybody that could really, get motivated, get inspired by some of the things we talk about on the show, please share. Just one other person, if you think that it would really, inspire them and hit them at just the right time, please do so. That's what the show is for. All right, I look forward to talking to you again. We got another mini episode coming up on Thursday, and then back here with another phenomenal guest next Monday. Take care of yourself. Talk soon.